Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Beaudoin, and I'm a Senior Advisor with Pathways Alliance, and I'm based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. My presentation today is fast-tracking success, identifying, nurturing, and supporting cleantech startups. I want to talk about three specific tools we use to help and support startups move towards commercialization. The first of those is how do we leverage ecosystem resources? Second is how we use techno-economic assessments. And third is how do we help startups access funding? And I hope that by the end of this presentation, you'll have a better understanding of how we help early stage technology companies move towards first of a kind deployment. But firstly, who's Pathways Alliance? So the Pathways Alliance is a collaboration between Canada's oil sands companies, and we represent over 95% of oil sands productions. And we work together to really do two things. The first one is we want to provide Canada's energy to the world. And second, we advance environmental innovation. Within the Pathways Alliance, I work for a division called COSIA, the Canadian Oil Sands Innovation Alliance. And in 2022, Canada's Oil Sands Innovation Alliance became part of Pathways. However, COSIA was formed in 2012, and we've been working on collaborative innovation since then. We really focus on four key areas of water, land, tailings, and greenhouse gases. Where I wanted to focus today is what we call our overall scale-up program, and that's how we help technology companies move towards first-of-a-kind deployment. And when you think of innovation or even environmental innovation, there's sort of two separate parts. One part is identifying what that technology is that you want to start moving towards the field and test and use. The second is actually doing that. Once you've identified that technology, is actually moving it to field, right? So you identify it and then you move it towards a first-of-a-kind field deployment. And what I'm going to be talking about today is that second part, where we've identified the technology and it is of interest to members. And that's really the first part of this slide when you start off on the light bulb on the left side of the slide. This is where industry is interested in the startup, and this is essentially customer demand. Now, if you ever worked in innovation, you know that when customers are interested in the technology, that is the number one opportunity. So we recognize that as customers, we can provide some value to that startup, helping them move through the ecosystem. The second part is these gears in the middle. And when you look at that, that is how we use the resources available in the ecosystem that are publicly funded organizations that can help that startup and that technology move faster towards commercialization. This could be accelerators, could be government labs, university labs, could be grants, all sorts of resources that are there to help that company commercialize their technology. And what we do is we make those connections in the ecosystem with the goal that that startup will go away and work with those experts to help further develop their technology. And the idea is after perhaps 6 months or maybe even a year, they've developed their technology, they come back, and the oil companies, the industry can then assess how have they done? How's their progress been? Do we want to further develop the technology, or do we think that there's no point in moving forward? And the idea is we keep iterating and iterating this process. We go, you've hit that milestone, what's the next milestone? How do we keep moving that technology forward, but always using available ecosystem resources? Now, that all sounds kind of easy, like resources, what are they? And I just want to give you an example of what that really looks like. And when you look at this model, remember that at this point, industry has interest in the technology and essentially starts in the first row, which is COSIA, the division I work for. We'll help that startup by giving them mentoring and coaching with industry specialists who have a clear understanding of what it'll take to get to that first-of-a-kind deployment in the oil sands. We may also make referrals to Cleantech accelerators. In this case, Foresight Canada, one of our partners. We refer a lot of early stage technology companies to them. And the opportunity here is the accelerator can help them better build out their value proposition, their technology roadmap, etc. So it really helps them focus on what is essentially important to the customer so that technology would be of benefit. Then we also might make referrals or engage that help that startup engage with potential technology advice, networking, and funding opportunities. And for us, we work with two primary government organizations, the National Research Council of Canada, which is a federal government department, and Alberta Innovates, which is a provincial government department. Both of those organizations offer different services, but they're fairly integrated in supporting local innovators. Then the last one here, VMSA, is Venturing Mentoring Services of Alberta. So once the technology company starts to mature, how do you develop the executives within that early stage company? And usually these are first-time entrepreneurs. They really want how do you build those leaders to better build their startup? And that's where we rely on Venture Mentoring Services of Alberta. This program, the mentoring program, was developed at MIT in Boston, and essentially it was brought to Alberta, and it's that model we use. So it's really instrumental in helping early stage companies who want to scale and grow. So that was one of the models we use. And it was interesting, when we started this process, we did a pilot with 5 different startups who came to us. And what was interesting is after a year, all 5 of those startups had received some type of funding or some type of mentoring from all of these organizations outside of COSIA. So we really proved that the model sort of could help engage and help that technology company move forward. We had one of our, I guess, most successful companies to date is OptiSeis, and I'll talk a little bit more about them later, but we worked with them all through this process. And they came to us, they've been since that time, since early 2020, they've already developed multi-million-dollar projects. They've got staff, over 10 staff, and I believe they're working now almost all over the world, right? So again, this process works. We piloted it and we've been, refining it ever since over the last 5 to 6 years. Another tool we use is we fund the techno-economic assessments of early stage technology companies. So when these companies come to us with a very early stage idea, they've got some lab tests, they think it'll work, it'll scale, but there's a lot of inherent risk in it. And what we use then for these very early stage technologies is techno-economic assessments. And we use sort of pre-screened engineering companies. We've got about a dozen engineering companies we work with. We have a standardized cost of about $30,000 to undertake these assessments. We also have a standardized table of contents in a way, or rubric, which covers technical feasibility, economic viability, desirability. Desirability could be things like, what is the IP? What's the regulatory environment like? How could this technology be used in adjacent sectors, et cetera? And the whole idea here is it really provides us a fairly inexpensive way to assess a technology relatively quickly and do a really professional review of it. Not simply looking and guessing, but paying a third party to do it. And so, what makes this different, I guess, is most companies, if you do the engineering company, industry would keep it. But what we do is we actually give the ownership of that report is with the startup. So the startup actually owns that report. And so the benefit of that is that if the technology looks promising, that early stage technology startup can take that report, that techno-economic assessment, and go talk with funders, go talk with other customers, potentially go talk with private equity investors and VC and angel investors, so that they can attract and move towards commercialization that much faster. And what we learned is an independent third-party assessment, really, done by a professional engineering firm at a very early stage in the development of the technology, is extremely helpful, right? And we really rely on this to really sort of map out what's the trajectory of getting these technologies to field. Another tool that we use is called funder discovery meetings. And this is where we work with technologies that have sort of got one-off grants, or they've got a little bit of money, but now they need sort of a larger fund to move their technology forward. And government grants one government grant may not be enough to cover it, but several government departments and funds could be able to support the development, further support the development. And in a nutshell, what we do is, in the simplest terms, we organize a meeting where industry explains why we're interested, the startup explains what they need, and the funders are in the room to do a Q&A. Right? And what that really looks like is, it's not industry choosing the funders who should be in the room. We actually let the CEO agree the priority funders. And the opportunity there is, they know who in the ecosystem can help them, but they may not have the contacts to make it work. We have a list. We recommend who should attend, but ultimately it's the CEO's decision. Then we will have that meeting, which we host, the CEO pitches, and the objective there is to have the funders a really open and honest discussion. And really what we're explaining to the funders at this time is, we go, this technology will need 300,000 at this phase, and if it's successful in 12 months, it'll need a $2 million project to move forward. So we're open and honest, explaining why we're interested in the technology, what is the support available, etc. And why do we do this? Why do we do this? Because what we've identified is, early stage technology companies, the opportunity for funding in Canada, there is significant amount of funding available, but it's a little bit of a labyrinth for the early stage startup to know who to talk to and why. And what we do is, we try to make those introductions all at once, almost short circuit the dialogues, to have one dialogue with all the major funders. And our biggest learning here, what really sort of works and what we saw evolving over the years, we've been at this for about 4 years now, is in the earliest years, the government funders, let's say you had 4 government funders in the room, they would show up and they would sort of go at the end of the meeting, after asking their questions, great, we'll have a follow-up meeting separately. Government Department 1 would have a meeting, Department 2, separate meeting. But what has now started to happen is, during the meetings, they'll say, yeah, we're interested. 2 or 3 funders, maybe all 4 of them would say, yeah, we're interested. Usually one of the government departments will say, hey, you know what? Thanks. We understand what you need. We'll go host a meeting and work it out. And what they do is, they'll identify like one department, because they're specialist in, let's say, funding university students. They will look at funding university students. They'll say, okay, we can fund that. The other organization will say, hey, we can fund capital expenses, or we can fund lab work, etc. So they work together to optimize the potential funding for that startup. And so that has been really successful. And what we've been able to show with this is, for those technologies that really need a little bit more money, it's not a $10,000 grant. They're looking at maybe $500,000 to $1 million. This is the ideal way to access that funding. But one thing I want to be very clear, although industry is hosting this meeting and we could be the potential first customer, the startup still needs to apply and meet all the criteria of each of the government grants. Because sometimes it's a combination of university grant, it could be federal government department, provincial government department. So they still need to apply to those grants, but in a way, they're going in with a larger ask that can really help them move to that next stage of development. So we found this very successful. The next thing, I want to give you an example of a real technology we worked with. I had talked about OptiSeis earlier on. And OptiSeis is really high resolution subsurface imaging and analytics. But I wanted to sort of start at the start. And a few years ago, for a number of years, our land group has been looking at low impact seismic technologies. And essentially they wanted to minimize the surface disruption when you conduct seismic, because it's porous and sometimes you have to sort of create roadways, etc. We wanted to minimize that disruption to do the seismic for seismic technology. And OptiSeis had approached us in the very early years and said, hey, we think we have something here. They'd seen that there was interest of, we were searching for a technology. And at the time, OptiSeis was really a small consulting company, but they had done so much work in the oil sands that they really had a solid understanding of all the work they did. If they could assemble all the work together, they could have a software that would do exactly what we needed. But they were very early stage, and they just had an idea with the beginnings of a product, which they labeled OptiSeis. So we had worked with them, and we thought, hey, this is pretty neat. The members expressed interest, and we referred them on to an accelerator, and they went through one of the local accelerators that really helped them craft their value proposition, work out their technology roadmap, etc. It was very positive, and they came back with a very solid pitch, right? Really knowing what they wanted to do to advance that technology. And at about the same time, our land group was doing a global search for exactly this, right? Low impact seismic technology. And OptiSeis, we recommended, please, pitch, apply, and they won second place, right? And from there, they really started to move forward very quickly. And I'll move on to the next slide. And what we can see here is in between 2020 and 2022, that was very early COVID, but despite that, they went through the accelerator. They further developed their technology. They applied, and as I said, and won second place in this global search. Then what we did is we moved to the next phase where they went and did their first field trial. They were very successful. They raised some money, both federal government, provincial government, and as well as industry money to do that first field trial. And they've been relatively successful. They've been growing from strength to strength. And the hope is they're now in the full commercialization, right? They are now fully developing their technology. And firstly, to note, you'll see this is a busy slide, right? It is a busy slide. But it is several organizations who support it. Although I say COSIA and Pathways have been instrumental, but as you can see, so has Alberta Innovates. That's our provincial government innovation group, the National Research Council of Canada, which is our federal innovation and R&D group. And as well, once they move into getting close to commercialization, you can see CRIN, Clean Resource Innovation Network, who is my host today at this event, who is our Canadian lead in Baku. So it really is a village that really raises this technology. And we really all collaborate because the end game is if we can move this technology to field, we can reduce environmental impacts. That's the objective. And this model has really shown us, and Andrea Crook, the CEO of OptiSeis and the OptiSeis technology, says it best when she identified that the support we were able to give to her and her team were able to help her move 1/3 faster, right, in the development time to get the field. So we really do see that our processes are helping these technologies move to that first of a kind deployment in our operations. So I want to talk about our key benefits, and this is almost the conclusion slide of what we talked about today. Firstly, we leverage available ecosystem resources. But what I also want to emphasize is we use very much repeatable processes, right? Same processes, same organizations. We keep building relationships. Do we agree to keep using these processes, these referral processes, making sure that it's very easy for the startup to build his network of resources to help him or her move to commercialization. The other thing is accessing to techno-economic assessments. As I said, industry funds these in order to really kickstart the development of the technology to see what is the future investment that is needed to commercialize or at least get to that one-of-a-kind deployment. And again, the report is owned by the startup, and that gives them the ability, if they're successful, if the technology looks promising, to then very quickly move to other organizations and share that report to gather more resources and to build their company. The last one is support for access to public funding. And what we realize is industry's voice of the customer. When we sit at the table and we talk with the funders and we represent the startup and explain why this is an opportunity, the funders, the labs, everybody understands that there is a true commercial opportunity here for the startup. And there's a true commercial opportunity for us as well. We see value in that technology, right? So the value that industry brings at this point is we are the customer and we can help that early stage technology access public funding. And the results really speak for themselves. Where we've helped develop technology, companies have been able to reduce their development time by up to a third, right? And we continue to improve. We'd like that to get faster and better, but what we are showing is progress in getting those first of a kind technologies to field. So on that, I would like to say thank you for your time today. Again, this is Pathways Alliance, and I'm with COSIA, a division of Pathways Alliance. And what I did want to say in closing is, if you do have a technology that you think that would be of benefit to oil sands, by all means, contact us. Or if you want to know more about this model, we definitely want to talk about it because we feel it really does add value for early stage technology companies. Thanks for your time today.